Hello friends, I'm Henry Seltzer,
And I'm Leslie Benson.
and we're here to talk about the full moon that's coming up this weekend, which is a pretty powerful one.
It is lots of Pluto. Mercury's retrograde, as many of you probably know.
And we're going to get right into it. Don't forget, if you haven't already, to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Okay, here we go with the chart. Well, here's the chart of this full moon, and we feel like it's a very dynamic one. We've been talking about that. What theme comes to your mind, Leslie, when you look?
Well, we definitely have a strong Pluto, and that would point to the continued theme of deep transformation, which is a process we've all been undergoing for years now at this point. But it's another continuation of that theme.
And to say a strong Pluto, I mean, one thing is this full moon does hit the Pluto. The opposition between Sun and Moon is just 45 degrees off of the actual degree, or 16, which would be very close to Pluto. So Pluto's aspected by the full moon, and also we know that Pluto's in a grand trine with this stationing Mercury. Mercury is at 1421. That's where it's going to station the very next day.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a grand trine between in-Earth signs between Mercury, Pluto, and Jupiter, which really emphasizes also the Pluto, which is in Capricorn and has been for some time a big factor, I would say. And what were you going to say about that, though?
Yeah, it's a powerful Earth grand trine. And I imagine that as Mercury is stationing, his influence is heightened and amplified.
Absolutely.
And that would point to me, he's been traveling through Taurus, and Taurus is a lot about the material plane and our sense of values of ourself and our relationships. And I imagine that there might be some deep stirrings in that particular area of life right now. So a lot up around, maybe self-worth, maybe what we value in ourselves. That can be challenging for a lot of us to really learn to love all of ourselves.
Every part of ourselves.
Every little part. But I imagine that also with Jupiter being there to kind of float things along, there's probably a lot of resource there too to be with that process in a way that's not just digging through the pain uselessly, that there's a way through it that can be easeful and positive. There's a lot of positivity that can come out of that, I imagine.
I like that, the positivity. And we also want to keep in mind, Jupiter can be so positive it can be almost too positive. And we do have a good dose of Saturn here as well, also at 14 degrees of Sag, making this square with Jupiter. And so we have a little bit of both. We have the plus of Jupiter saying, we can make it through this, no matter how much pain you seem to feel inside, there's a value to it, especially if you learn from it, especially if you spend the time with it. If you just ignore it, it doesn't work so well.
And if you do ignore it, Saturn's probably there to keep you in line.
you'll have some reminders. I love what Abraham, the channel being Abraham from Louis Hicks, says, which is that if you have a problem and you ignore that problem, don't worry, it'll get worse.
Exactly.
And then you won't be able to ignore it any longer.
Yeah, it'll keep getting your attention.
So there is a lot of, I would say there's a lot of going inside with all these retrogrades. Don't forget that Mars is also retrograde, and Mars is also, we must remember to mention, is very much part of this full moon, being conjunct in the same degree of Sag with the moon itself. The moon is moving toward it, so there's going to be feeling that internal meditative stance, which is represented by both of these personal planet retrogrades. Not so much the other planets that might be retrograde, but the personal planets in retrograde always have this feeling of introspection associated with them. So I think there's been a lot of soul searching, a lot of questioning what the motivation is, what is the higher purpose, where are we going with this? And if we have those questions and we duck them, there's a tendency, right, to go, I don't want to deal with that right now. I have to finish this project. I have to get this report out. I have to make this sale, whatever it might be that you're in the middle of, building your house or taking care of your relatives or some personal problems of yourself, whatever there might be on your plate. there's a tendency to ignore what's really happening at deeper levels, and those things are really up for us now. And I think it's a great timing to
Mm-hmm.
just tune in and really think about that. What is the real meaning of that? Where is it in my life that I could perhaps be making a change that matters, that has been overdue?
Mm-hmm.
Don't you think?
I do. I agree with that. And something else that I'd like to mention around the moon conjunct
Oh yeah.
Mars there is probably, like, I think you mentioned motivation and internal motivation, and sometimes it when we are confronted with those places that are more challenging and difficult arising within ourselves, it's like where do we find the juice to really like pick ourselves up and move through it? And there
Mm.
is a strong warrior energy to Mars, so I think that that can help us along and help us kind of sit in the fire of our internal experience, even if it's really painful. And maybe it won't be. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe it won't be as painful as you think.
Maybe it won't be. But I think that that's probably a lot of what's up right now is confronting those places and using that inner juice, that inner fire flame, and it could appear as anger. Mars can sometimes rile up those places that we have chosen maybe not to look at for a while, and there is a fuel there to kind of move us through and into whatever is calling our attention.
Yeah, and very important, isn't it? When you have that reactivity come up, that's really an attempt by the ego inside of all of us that's there, that's present, to push it away. It's like when it's reactivity and it's pointing the finger saying, this is what you did. How could you do that to me?
Mm-hmm.
You're making me angry right now. A tendency, of course, that puts it away. The blame game and the
Mm-hmm.
finger pointing pushes it away from our own process. And the reminder is to just stop and reflect, where in myself is
Absolutely.
being triggered here? Where is that coming from? My own
Mm-hmm.
experience, my own reactivity? Because you can have another reaction to somebody that's upset and yelling at you. You can say, oh my gosh, I can see you're really upset.
Mm-hmm.
That's another way. But it's hard to do that when you're triggered. So, I mean, that's the secret, isn't it? To see if you can move past the initial reaction, say, I'd like to take 5 right here, or I'd like to take 10.
Mm-hmm.
And let me just think about that for a minute. Don't go away. I'm right here, but I'm just, let me think of it. Let me reflect,
Mm-hmm.
because you can get a lot of mileage out of that brief pause of reflection sometimes when the anger does come up.
So I'm hearing there. What I'm hearing you say is there's the pause to take care of ourselves when we are triggered and not be responding or moving or taking action from that place.
Hmm.
And then once coming back to a place of clarity and more calm, then choosing how to treat the situation.
That's good.
That speaks to me a lot of Saturn and the personal responsibility there, and really, not pointing the finger of blame elsewhere, but to really, receive whatever experience is coming forth and seeing what it's reflecting to us about ourselves, even if it appears as though it's someone else's fault.
Yeah, I think it's always true that when we're in difficulties and we've had a difficult time, or a hard time that just seems like we've had to deal with a lot of things, if we go through that and there's no lesson, then it really is truly a waste of energy, and it's too bad that we took that, whatever it was, that wrong turn. But if that can become a learning experience, I think
Mm-hmm.
that's when you can get the value out of it, and maybe it's at that point it's worth the price you paid in terms of suffering and upset.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
One way to look at it.
Yeah.
And let's not forget also, when you mentioned the warrior energy of Mars, I like that. And I'm also thinking of the warrior energy of this new planetary energy that I've been exploring, which is,
Mm-hmm.
I believe, a spiritual warrior or a feminine warrior energy for finding out what it is that only you can provide. So there
Mm-hmm.
is something that you bring to the table that's uniquely yours, and highlighted by the uniqueness aspect of Uranus. Uranus is all about finding your own way, your own individual, quirky way of looking at it,
Mm-hmm.
and celebrating that, and being okay with other people not being on the same bandwagon, because you're on your own bandwagon, and that's all very up for us right now, and more so over the summer, because over these next few months, because
Mm-hmm.
they are coming together. June 9th will be the exact between them at 23 degrees, and then all the rest of the year they're only a degree apart. So as they are now. So, it's a pretty wild time out there in media land and political land in
Yeah.
America. We don't know what the conventions this summer hold for us in this country,
Whew.
and we do know that it's a pretty wild ride. We've seen some crazy things, and we might see some more. So it's a time of unexpected events and perhaps unexpected enlightenment. We can hope that comes
Fingers
from,
crossed.
yes, absolutely, it comes from looking inside ourselves and being a little bit more alert to what is there and what's
Yeah.
going on there. To follow those threads and pay attention.
Right. It's interesting. I hear that there's kind of, that Eris and Uranus are both collectively, because they move more slowly through the zodiac, they have more of a generational quality, and they're is
True.
that accurate that they're affecting things on a collective way, but then there's always a reflection individually for what that means. But when I see Eris and Uranus coming together, I just imagine extreme revolution, and it's already happening.
A
I feel like
revolutionary time, absolutely.
the winds of change are already upon us and have been for some time now. But I'm super interested to see what their exact conjunction and then being together for many months brings.
It really runs up to 2020, which is the same span as as Rick Tarnas in Cosmos and Psyche points out, the 15-degree mark, or the 10-degree mark in the case of a square like this, is a valid width or a valid orb of contact between also, as we've been talking many times in the past, Pluto and Uranus. So we have this Pluto-Uranus social revolution that's taking place, that's also a private individual revolution that's taking place. It does depend a little bit how it hits your chart. So if you have something at 17 degrees of a cardinal sign, if you had something at 22 or 23 degrees of a cardinal sign, these are very strong times for you, and you're going through the ringer. And just recognize that, and recognize that there's a purpose to it, I would say.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, anything else before we close up on talking about this full moon? I mean, we haven't talked much about the fact that it's Gemini, it's Sag, which does have to do with understanding. It has to do with taking the higher plane or higher mind perspective to the extent that you can. That we're curious right now. We're looking into things from
exploring
a standpoint of what can we find out about. And it's a good way to get your point across sometimes too. Carolyn Casey is fond of pointing out, noted astrologer, visionary activist, astrologer Carolyn Casey. She says, curiosity is a great way to approach something. Like instead of saying, "I want to tell you," you can start out with, "Did you know?" And your own curiosity and the curiosity of others is aroused right now. So.
Yeah, I think maybe one last thing I'd like to mention around that theme and the moon being in Sagittarius and Saturn also being there in Sag is this idea of alignment and what that actually feels like and what that means. And I think it gets talked about a lot, and I've been exploring it myself. But so, it's this idea of Sag has a lot to do with the highest good of all, and the higher, there's like the higher realms of learning and being in contact with our own spirit or soul and whatever that might look like. And being in that listening, there are certain things that are going to jive and be in harmony with that, and then there are things that are going to be discordant with that. And I think that that's just something right now that's going to be very clear in the coming months, and especially right now. If something doesn't seem to fit, it probably doesn't, and there's like kind of maybe, especially with the retrogrades too, a purging that happens of like that which no longer fits is shedded away, and then what wants to emerge anew.
Well, I think that's a great point, that this is a time when we really have to tune in to what's going on and pay attention. Time to pay attention and to take it in the highest possible way. Well, in closing, I always like to mention resources, and with so much Pluto in this going on right now, I like to talk about several Pluto books, and one is, I like to talk about Stephen Arroyo's book, Astrology, Karma, and Transformation. He talks about Pluto, he talks about Saturn. Speaking of Saturn, Liz Green's book, Saturn, A New Look at an Old Devil, very appropriate for right now with so much Saturn in its picture. And then also other Pluto books you might find, like, there is, of course, Jeffrey Wolf Green, his book called just Pluto, The Journey of the Soul. And then there's one by also Stephen Forrest, Book of Pluto, and there's one also by Mark Jones right now has a book which involves Pluto, involves evolutionary astrology viewpoints. So there's a lot of great books out there you can pick up on how to react to some of these outer planet transformations that we're, transits and transformations that we're seeing.
Mm-hmm. I would like to add a resource as well. It's one of my favorites and probably the single most helpful learning tool I've had as a blossoming astrologer, and that's the Time Passages software.
Which, very good. Very nice.
I might be biased too. No, really. Henry wrote all of the interpretations and the point and click features where you can, anything that piques your curiosity, you can just click on it and find out a whole wealth of information about it. So during any transit, I just look at a lot of different charts, and I find a lot of really juicy information that way. It's a great learning tool. So yeah, I'd like to recommend that as well.
Well, thanks. Very good. And then also, of course, the book that I wrote, I always mention, which is Eris, Revelations from the Astrological Eris. It's called The 10th Planet, rather, Revelations from the Astrological Eris. And that's a new take on a new planet that came in 2006 that does prove to be very powerful in charts. So that's been quite an interesting study that I've done.
It has been fascinating to be on the ride a little bit with you on that one.
Yes, you have.
See, yeah, it's a very powerful archetype, and I was very curious to find where my placement was, so yeah, something that you might want to look into the book, and then the software also has Eris interpretations if you're curious about your own Eris placement.
That's true. Very good.
Yeah.
Well, we'll close for now, so have a great couple of weeks, and see you next time.